Welcome to the THA podcast for free thoughts and open minds. Hello and welcome to edition 9. I'm Paul Obertilli and it's great to be back here on the THA podcast, a show brought to you by Theo Humanist Arts. Here at THA we bring you weekly shows where we'll get stuck into many discussions and bring you all the best interviews we can get our hands on. Our talks include news, conspiracy, spirituality, the occult, history, art, fashions, music and much more. If you have any feedback you'd like to send our way, any ideas for the show, requests for potential guests or something you yourself would like to share with us, you can do so by emailing info@thapodcast.com. That's info@thapodcast.com. Now for my little disclaimer. We have many guests on the show with different perspectives, different spiritual views, different mindsets and different opinions. We have our opinion, you have your opinion, and they have their opinion. That's as far as it goes with the show here. We just want to bring the information out to you and allow you to make of it what you will. We don't have a hive mind where we're targeting a certain view, nor where we expect everyone to agree with us with everything. Who knows the truth, but it's just fun finding out, eh? Anyway, on to some thank yous. I'd like to thank Shoni Owens again for your continued support. It's much appreciated. Also, thanks go out to Zachary Denman from David Icke's People's Voice. Zachary is actually working with our David on some dramatics for the channel, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. This week's guest is going to be Darren Storer. Darren Storer is a psychic and also the author of the book Key of the Storm, a book on visions and dreams, and also Poems Without a Home. His latest book is due for release around October, called The Recusant Who Never Recanted. So in a little while we'll be talking with Darren about his psychic abilities and about his books. But before we do that, it's time for the dramaturge of the show, Mr. David Parry. How are you doing, David?
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my good time gal. Good afternoon, Mr. Obertelli. Is the sun shining on your Sunday afternoon?
It is, actually. It is. I've had a nice Sunday roast. It is good recording this show on a Sundays because I'm always so chilled and laid back. So
I wish I was. I am traumatized after a major bust-up with my nearest and dearest yesterday and a revelation.
Oh, I'm sort of using my psychic powers here now. Is something happened in the West End?
Something horrific. Now, this is said with love and respect. She's a very good performer. Angela Lansbury is appearing in Noel Coward's Blithe Spirit in the West End. In itself, that doesn't mean much, but all I can say is, my God, woman, how old are you? You were an old woman when I was going to school. So I feel somehow shaken and basically stirred.
I think maybe our guest might have needs a bit of explaining here of what play you're talking about there.
Noel Coward was a national treasure. He's a brilliantly gifted playwright and an actor. The play is set basically when a spirit returns from the afterlife to create nausea in this world by showing out the defects and failings of the living. So in other words, like most of Noel Coward's comedies, it's really about our society and the awfully user-unfriendly middle classes.
Well, that sounds interesting. Maybe I'll have to check that out. But let's crack on with today's interview. Over to Darren Storer. Darren, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
And what are you up to at the moment?
Mostly just working on notes for the next book and a couple of finishing touches to the one that I've just completed.
Could you tell us a little bit about your most recent one coming out, the Recusant Who Never Recanted?
Yep. The Recusants Who Never Recanted is a sequel/prequel to The Key of the Storm,
right? Which
is based upon a time period in the 90s where basically a series of visions/dreams occurred. And so I've written of the meaning of those and of the philosophical, if not theological, conversations that occurred afterwards.
Okay, because you also have a psychic powers as well. Does it carry a lot into the work that you do?
Yes, that is basically the foundation of the book,
Okay.
or of all the books.
Okay, well, I think maybe if we go into a little bit of your psychic abilities, we'll get stuck into that, and then we can sort of later in the interview go over into how you carry it into your work. When did you first start realizing that you had psychic abilities?
I first started realising a proper
Yeah.
through a chance meeting with David Parry back in the early 90s. Until then, I'd gone from early childhood wondering what the hell was going on mostly.
Okay, so what kind of things were you going through that confused you as a child in this way?
I was visions, seeing things that shouldn't have been there, touching things and picking up information, visions from those. Basically channeling, but I had no idea what it was at the time. The family upbringing didn't allow for these things to even be brought up in conversation. School-wise, it was rejected immediately. You can't say these things. So I went through my formative years wondering if I hadn't become some sort of idiot or insane.
Right. When you said you saw things, did it come across as physical people, or could you explain the nature of those kind of visions?
It would depend on the type of vision because they varied. The main thing is that they have one thing in common, that although they can feel as if they're lasting for considerable lengths of time, in reality it's probably mere seconds. One moment, say, I'd be sitting, as I did especially as a child, by a river, and the next seconds I would literally be elsewhere. And then once the vision had finished, I would return to myself. It may even be a form of astral projection, but I would then be left wondering why, what's happened, and what does it mean.
So
I had no one at all to explain it to me.
So like missing time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're looking at seconds at a time.
That's kind of interesting because you hear a lot of that in alien abductions where people say, "Oh, I was going along, missing time." Have you ever? Do you not remember what happened in that time, or?
Oh yeah, that's what I've written about.
Yeah. Oh, I see. So as time went on, you've had memories of what happened in that time lapse.
I remember all of them.
Yeah.
That's the strange. Oh, it may not be a strange thing, but I actually remember them.
Yeah.
And it became, would be 2010. There was another series of visions that kept repeating, and this time I would say I understood enough to start writing them down. There was no intent to write a book to begin with. It was, I'll get this on paper and try to understand more. And somehow, by a stroke of luck, it became published. And then the reaction from people who've read it told me, okay, let's carry on. It is worth not just doing it for myself, but now it's become something to help other people in a way. There's so many people out there going through similar experiences, but with no one to talk to or even try to help them understand it.
Right.
They become shunned, even by themselves. So, in every book I've written, or on my Facebook pages, I say to people, if you want to talk, if you have no one else to talk to, contact me. I may or may not be able to help. There are people far more powerful than me. They may understand it better, but at the very least, I can be an ear to listen.
So do you have you communicated with entities, beings with your gift, or
Yes.
that happen regularly?
Yes, is the best way to describe it, because a lot of what I write, some people have suggested, I'm not certain of this myself, but I've been asked, am I purposely channeling, say, Crowley, for instance?
Oh, okay.
And the answer to that is, I've never tried to channel anybody on purpose, but if someone wishes to speak, then I'll speak with them.
Oh, so you think you have communicated with Alistair Crowley?
Possibly.
Interesting.
It's hard to say because I'm going to be honest. Everything is, when it's written down,
Yeah.
it's as if with some of the poems I've been taken over. Some are my own views, my own experiences, but some of the poems I can't say are my own language or words. There is this thing that overtakes, whether it's coming through a spirit guide or just some form of direct contact, I can't say. I'm not going to lay claim to anything other than I sit to write, and then sometimes while I'm typing away, something else shows up, something becomes written that I have no idea where it's come from or how it got there. And then when I show it to people, that's when I get asked, well, that's like this person, or that's like that person, or where did this come from?
That's quite interesting because that's almost actually how Alistair Crowley claimed a lot of his text came from himself, from channeled writings and stuff. So it'd be interesting if you did actually channel him at some point through those in that same method. It's quite interesting that.
Quite often I've been asked, do I know him, which is rather odd because it's a lot of students especially, and to try and explain to them, no, he died in 1947. That's 19 years before I was born. And then you get accusations or hints of, well, okay, you don't have to tell me. And to try and convince people that he's actually dead sometimes becomes a problem. It's as if they feel I'm trying to hide something.
Right. Okay, so at what point in your life did you start to learn more about what these experiences were and deal with them better?
In my teens, I started to find books that they didn't actually explain, but they reported similar things. Mostly, I spent a lot of time in my teenage years hunting through old bookshops and all sorts of places. Sometimes they were helpful, sometimes they were just absolute rubbish. But it would be, I'm guessing, about 93, 94. I met David by chance, who pulled me to one side, recognising what was around me. We went straight off into the pub opposite where I worked, sat and had a conversation, and from there, that's when my education occurred. That would be my early 30s.
Right.
So until that stage, it would be, the best way to describe my life would be just bouncing off of walls.
Right.
I had no idea, really, or truly, of what was actually occurring. I was getting to the stage where I actually believed people were right and that I was, in some way, suffering from some mental schism or just going insane.
Well, I can imagine it must be difficult, especially if you're going into like a busy pub. And I mean, I'd imagine, I know certain cases where people, they're hearing voices and they become very withdrawn and nervous. And I've often wondered, is that a case? Could these people actually be psychic and just not really having a control over it and stuff? And it isn't interesting if you think how many psychic people there really are out there that are branded as being crazy.
Well, it is something you need to learn, to be able to close off from. And I had no idea how to. That's one of the first things through the conversations we had that David actually taught me.
Right, okay. And are you actually like a part of any spiritual belief? Have you got a religion of your own, or?
No.
No.
Not really. Some people claim this to be a heretical view, but my view is wherever I am, whichever spirits there are that wish to speak, to me, then let them. I try to be respectful of any place I'm in. This, I'll explain my presence there to whatever's around and ask for their permission to be there. It may seem odd, but it saves confusion later on. For example, I went to Rochester Cathedral not so many moons ago. The moment I walked in there, now I don't like churches. I can cope with the architecture, even the artwork, but I don't like setting foot in them really. I feel uncomfortable, and every time I go into one, I get the same reaction. Hostile looks. I know I'm not meant to be in those places. When I went to Rochester Cathedral, within moments, now my wife was just wandering around, looking at the architecture, taking the odd photograph. I was being watched and followed by a bloody priest.
Right.
And for what purpose?
That is quite odd.
But it happens.
Yeah.
Wherever I go.
Right.
I'm just not welcome in those places.
Well, that's interesting. If you look at, obviously, we're talking about Christianity. There's quite a broad spectrum of it, but you do in history there was a lot of Christian movements that didn't look too favourably of psychics and people working with divination and so on. So it's quite interesting. Maybe subconsciously that's what's still out there.
Well, the Orthodox religions are pretty much the same, even with the schisms in Christianity.
Yeah.
The Catharist movements, or some people call them the Bogomils or the Albigensians, even the Arian Church. In the early Christian movements, they were all wiped out by the Orthodox Western part of Catholicism, especially after the donation of Constantine, which was later proved to be a false document anyway. But to me, all religions are just basically beggars fighting over scraps from a feast that occurred thousands of years before. They have no idea what the original message is. It's changed year by year by politics, social conditions, and to keep people in control. Religion shouldn't be, you have to follow this. It should be, here you are, this is what's here, get on with it. Let each God or spirit speak to you in a manner suited best for your level of acceptance or understanding.
Right. Next week we'll be interviewing Brian Cano from the American TV program Haunted Collector, and he's like he's behind all the technical gear that they use for the program. What are your views on the paranormal in that aspect? Do you think there's a lot to explore there, or do you have a different view of it?
I believe there's an awful lot to explore there, even digging up grounds to build new houses. Who knows what you're disturbing that's there? There's elementals, the spirits of those who've passed on but not moved on. Who knows what you're disturbing and how they're going to react? And so I think there's a lot there. Unfortunately, and you'll see it on Facebook a lot, I hate to mention that place, but a lot of faked videos, right, which brings it into disrepute. The same as fakery in any, say, trade, for want of a better term. If people can go and come up with some conclusion of what's happening in a place, or even make contact with what's there, why not?
Yeah.
It may help.
Yeah.
Some things just want to have contact. Some aren't even aware you're there, but it doesn't hurt to walk in carefully and see what you can do, see what you can find out. Right. You have to find things out.
Yeah. Could we pause there, guys? Okay, we had to pause there for a second, and actually something quite strange. And when we started talking about that, all my wireless keyboard and wireless mouse has actually stopped working, so I've had to plug in a USB mouse. Not making any claims here, I'm just saying that is quite strange. So we'll get on with the interview now. Where were we there? You were just explaining about the We were just talking about the Brian Cano on those television where they're doing a lot of technical inspecting of haunted places. So you do support that idea. Have you ever done any of it yourself?
Me, not in the way they do. I've walked into places and picked things up and tried certain things, but I've never been involved with any paranormal team.
Right.
There's one in America, especially the Core Phenomena research team, that I've been speaking to quite a lot. I'm actually editing a book for them, or ghostwriting it, if you'll pardon the pun. But sometime when circumstance and health permits, the intention is to travel over to meet up with them and take part in one or two of their investigations.
Okay, well that sounds it. If we did if we arranged something, THA podcast haunted investigation, would you be up for coming along?
Yeah,
That could
be
really
fun.
cool. That could be really cool, wouldn't it, David?
Well, I think we have to. I mean, he's such a powerful medium. Let me say, but not to interrupt your flow of questions, Paul, but Darren, I mean, I've known Darren for years. He's a very, very good friend of mine. He honestly is one of the most powerful physical mediums I've ever met. And let me just give everyone a story, which I tend to trot out at a time like this. Gospel truth. He came to an old flat of mine years back and said, "Can you see this?" I mean, he obviously was, excited about something. I couldn't work out what it was. I, for the first time, saw ectoplasm, which isn't this sort of cotton wool stuff you see on the mock-ups, which the spiritualists use. I'm not saying they're pretending they're real. I think most genuine spiritualists will actually say, of course, they're mock-ups because you can't photograph it. Something electrical ran along the ceiling, amber-coloured, purely electrical, very, very quick, dropped to the floor and disappeared repeatedly. And little heads the size of oranges would begin to appear around his shoulders, form an angry face, then disappear.
Right.
Darren is a remarkable person that people need to take a lot more seriously in this field and in many others.
Well, I'll certainly be checking some of his books out, and it will be really good to get that paranormal investigation outing organised. Shoni Owens has spoken to me about arranging something herself, so maybe we can team up and do something. It's certainly an exciting option, and we could broadcast some of it on the podcast so our listeners can check out what we come up with, or some of them can join us. But yeah, that would be really good, I think.
Well,
I think we've got to.
Yeah.
If there is a chance of suggesting a place,
Yeah.
it is down some distance from everybody, myself included. On the Kent coast, Reculver Tower was in Reculver. It's just off the side of Herne Bay.
Okay.
That's, as a child, when I used to be taken there for those holidays, that place there, which I know others have gone and researched and carried out their paranormal investigations, as a child I began to take more notice because I'd been taken there and I could see what was there. And I've advised people in the past not to take even a stone from the place because of the link it fills. There's all sorts of very unpleasant stuff going on there. Lots of echoes. And that, for a proper investigation, you might well find you're picking up very, very audible phenomena, possibly even lots of visual.
Right. Well, I think that may be the beginning of a little team we'll get to do that one. That could be really interesting. So we'll to our listeners, keep your ears peeled for that, because we'll let you know how that develops. But it's something that we've been thinking about doing. So yeah. Yes. So moving on a bit. Going on to the subject of remote viewing, I understand that's not something you do. Could you explain the difference of what you go through to remote viewing?
If I'm actually physically at a place, I can pick things up by touching something or just being within the confines of that area. But to, say, be handed a photograph, or for someone to try to speak, say, over a telephone line or by a computer, it becomes painful. There's too much interference, too many other things that get in the way. There are people who can do it. I've spoken to them, but it's not my particular forte. I am quite happy to be in any location and work from there. But to try and do it from a long way away, I don't like it. It's just unpleasant for me.
Yeah, it does sound a little bit far out there if it's not something you're used to doing.
Well, I've tried and I've had some results, but it isn't good for me. That's what I will say. I mean, the early experiments I carried out in my teenage years with mirrors, some people define that as scrying, but I wasn't trying to look for anything in particular or into the future or into the past. And the first attempts, all I got was nosebleeds and bloody headaches, just exhaustion. Eventually, the first thing I saw, and from those people I've spoken to, it seems to be a common occurrence, is I actually saw myself age. And then the face changed from my own to something else. From there, I carried on over the years. A mirror in the end became, it's just a prop, something to focus on, the same as a bowl of oil, water, a candle, or even a stone. It becomes a mindset where you don't need them to look elsewhere, but they do aid the concentration. With the mirror, I started to see other places or other faces, which weren't, say, I can't particularly say those inhuman or human, other, it would be a best description. Perhaps an elder race, I'm not certain. And some of the places I saw carvings on stones or wall paintings, for one of those better descriptions, that sort of thing. And I was being drawn further and further into it. Now, with that could last for hours at a time. But that's not a vision as such. I actually would consider that more a form of astral projection. Whereas, I mean, David and myself experimented with that once, which worked quite well. But a vision itself comes, for me at least, without warning. It's picks the right moment, thankfully, whoever's intending me to see these things. And it is literally seconds. But it can feel as if I've experienced something for hours. In the books, I haven't just written about them in the conversations. I've actually included subchapters where parts of the conversations have taken place or actual events. One of the things I used to do, especially in my teenage years, was to get away from everybody. I used to just hop on a train or a tube just to find a place where there would be no one around. So if this was going to happen, I'd be left in peace so that afterwards I could try to digest it. I actually got to a stage where I was actively seeking anything that would show. I did pay a price for that eventually, but again, that's something David knows about. But I settled down in my 30s and learned to control it, direct what I'm trying to do. And say 2010, I was forced to retire in 2004 because of injury. These visions started coming again of a certain type, more and more. And I am aware I was actually being told to write them down. I had no idea why at the time, other than I was being told to do something. So I did. And it snowballed from there. I've probably not got the typical author's experience. I've been exceedingly lucky. I sent my first book off, and within a couple of weeks or so, I had a contract, which is, that's unbelievable, but that's just how it works.
let me take you into literature for a little while, Darren.
Yeah.
I've described you from the public platform as an organic intellectual. I hold by that description. For those who aren't too clear about that, there was a very, very gifted theoretician called Antonio Gramsci who said, you know, people become intellectuals in all sorts of ways. And sometimes those without the formal training can be just as powerful and profound, but they've grown up from their surroundings. They've developed from their context and they've transcended that context. I mean, I certainly think your books are gifted. They're highly imaginative. I mean, would you like to talk about sort of the theme? I mean, would you say there's a theme running through all of the books, or are they sort of independent projects?
The Key of the Storm is the first part of a trilogy, which will take us up to really about the year 2000, where we stopped the conversations, where we lost contact. I think it was about 2001 even. The poetry books came about by accident, but the trilogy itself is about how I've experienced these visions and experiments that took place to take me further into that world, how people reacted.
Yeah.
There are also hidden in those clues to how I did it, some more direct than others.
Yeah.
There's two other sub-stories that continue through these books, for want of a better term. One is about a circle I briefly joined, and one is more of the results that occurred within relationships and how people reacted at the time.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things that intrigues me about your work, Darren. You've had some very strong reactions to your work. I mean, do you want to talk about that for a minute, and what's your view of that?
I've been told I'll burn in hell and all the rest of it. I've been accused of heresy, being a Satanist.
Oh, really?
As I pointed out, well, who exactly is Satan? Because I don't actually think you know. Yes, the person was a Christian and they started quoting all the Bible and all the Gospels. And as I asked them, well, the Gospels didn't actually even become included in anything until those politically sanctioned at the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD. Constantine and Eusebius trying to unify the Eastern Orthodox and the Western churches. Look at all the books, from a better description, they removed because they was politically unsound. None of those four Gospels agree on a single point. None of them were even written within 30 to 50 years of the supposed death of Jesus. And even then, mistranslations are appalling. You know, Jesus of Nazareth, he was a Nazarite, member of an Essene Gnostic sect, fine. But to say he was Jesus of Nazareth, a town that didn't exist until 50 years after his death, supposed, it's just, you know, if they're going to argue religion to me, then they should get the facts right and actually look into what is actually being said in those books.
I mean, all of this shows very clearly that you're a well-read man. I mean, we've talked about that before. You are a well-read man. And your surname, I mean, the title of the first book is a bit of a pun, isn't it? Because your surname, Storer, actually means storm.
Yeah. In the original German form, it is actually Darren Storer, which means destroyer. Which can be taken in the degree of what a storm does. That was never intended. It's because people kept saying to me, there's so many dark clouds around you,
right?
And blah, 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 and you should be terrified of them. And I have only one answer. Whatever's around me is my shadows. I'm as much a part of them as they are of me. That is how I came to be. So why should I be scared of them? I have no fear of my own darkness. It's of my own creation, and I will use it as I will.
I mean, that leads to another curious connection. I mean, I remember you telling me when your publisher had received the manuscript, what, there was something like an electrical storm that broke
Yeah.
out?
They've actually included it on the website for the book.
Mhm.
They state, I'm paraphrasing, but as they were reading the key of the storm, a large electrical storm broke out on the lake that their offices overlook, and the thunder was loud and powerful enough to rattle objects in the office.
Mm. Mm.
Even with the first book launch, The Key of the Storm, back in December 2011, that night there was a huge storm over London.
Right.
Which was quite fun.
Yeah. I mean, at the risk of giving myself a plug, people have been telling me that one of your characters is loosely based on me. Do you want to talk about that?
It's not loosely based, it is you.
Oh my God.
It's Celts. Basically, when we first started to speak, you pointed out of bloodlines and so on. I know my own is on the paternal side is Saxon, on the maternal side is French Norman. Yours was Celtic.
Yeah.
You're referred to as the Celt and an Odinist through The Key of the Storm, in the poetry books, in the Recusant who never recanted.
Oh my God.
And in the final part of that trilogy, which I only have a loose title at the moment to work with the notes and files that I haven't really even collated properly yet. That's the... I'm not actually going to even say the loose title because I don't like it. I just can't think of one for it at the moment.
Well, I mean, Darren, I'm fascinated by your psychic work. You know that, but I'm equally fascinated by your literature. I mean, can you see an overall trajectory, an overall pathway where this is going? You know, if there isn't a theme as such, because you've just finished a trilogy, would you say all of it's based on particular trends in literature, or are you exploring? I mean, what's your view on that?
I am writing it was to begin with more a cathartic exercise. It was just to get it out of the system so I could look and say, no, I've read that. Instead of just trying to remember it, I've read it and I can digest it and try to understand it more. But with the accident of publishing and the reactions of people and the conversations, it's now become, this was my journey, this is what I did. Yours may differ, however, there's a line, a direction within it, which, okay, that's going to change for every single person, but it's there to help. Some people can read it and say, okay, fine, enjoyed the story. Some people are reading it, then contacting me and saying, I understand what's behind it. Some people are saying, you shouldn't do that. But that's not for them to say. I won't tell anybody, don't take a path. Take the path that you want. There's the risks, get on with it. Everybody has to do their own thing.
Well, I mean,
one
thing I need to flesh out this particular part of our discussion. I mean, I noticed on some of the websites that your first book, which again I think was incredibly successful, was actually described as a description of a psychic's life when it went wrong. I mean, I'm sort of in two minds about that. What's your view of that?
The parts of it that went wrong, you were able to help me with the main one.
Okay.
Remember, with the shoulder especially.
Yeah.
And I knew what happened, and that was my own fault. Some people have seen it as more of a tragedy
Mm.
in that, you know, look at how you've been through all this, how very, very sad. And it's not. It's about, this is what I went through, this is how I learned to deal with it, and this is how I dealt with those who got in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Simple.
Well, let me round off sort of my group of questions. Yeah, I mean, you've been on American podcasts, American radio broadcasts. I mean, there was, what was it? One was called Wacko Dave or something.
Yeah.
Because they make light. They like making light of, you know, the experience of a psychic. I mean, so you're quite a sort of a media-friendly writer. You know, do you have any plans, apart from gracing us, of course, with the podcast today? How do you see that side of your literature developing?
Oh, well, basically, keep writing as long as the visions are coming, or as long as whatever's there wants to write through me. As I said at the start, some of the poetry I have, even in the last poetry book, I've no idea how it came to be. I've actually written a section, even describing, I've no idea what it's doing. I can have a theme in my head, I can work on it. A poem can take 4 lines, a few minutes, or it can take days and be pages long. But some of the poems are just appearing, fully fledged, fully finished. And I look at them and, well, that's not my language. I wouldn't have written that.
Well, I think that leads directly back to Paul's questioning about psychism and psychic abilities. Paul, what do you make of that?
Well, this stuff always fascinates me. How can it not? You know, we're talking about something that's potentially revolutionary, and particularly nowadays, science is leaning more and more towards supporting such thing. Exactly. I'd like to think at some stage on the show we'll get some scientific people as well to talk about this stuff, which is equally as interesting. What I will say, Darren, is if you were to give us some advice, some people out there that might suspect that they're psychic or even would like to try and explore that side of themselves, have you got any advice on how they can bring it out of themselves, or is it a personal thing?
It is a personal thing, but there are ways and means to develop it.
Yeah.
It's a very long, hard path. It's covered with thorns. You are going to get battered, bloody, and torn. Because if you set foot on the wrong patch, you will be torn apart because of it. Simple as. You will not just be suffering doubts and nightmares, you will suffer physically as well, if not even spiritually. There are ways to protect yourself. Asafoetida, ash branches, some people use. There's all manner of things. But to begin with, you can't set foot into these worlds if you have doubts. You have to be a true cynic. You have to have no doubts. If you doubt your own self, you will pay a price, and you need to progress at your own pace. If someone is trying to teach you and you aren't ready, then you have to slow it down. It comes to everybody in a different way.
So I would
be born with it.
Yeah, I'd recommend to our listeners, obviously, if you are looking to explore this side, make sure you know what you're doing, or being assisted or helped with someone that does know what they're doing, because obviously it's got some there are some, as Darren's pointed out, there are some dark places, so it's got to be done with care. What book would you like to promote, particularly your most recent one, the Recusant Who Never Recanted?
Well, that is going to launch October, November, so I'm told.
Right.
That, again, prequel to The Key of the Storm. It starts off with childhood visions and how they were reacted with, and the conversations that took place where they were examined and explained and dissected. The midpoint of the book leaps back into the 90s, where these are the events that took place after those described in The Key of the Storm. The visions, the experiences, the events, I'm not going to give too much away on the ending on that one, but it is left with a question.
Okay.
I spend a lot of time. I won't say I deny the existence of gods, because I don't. The only thing I'll say about gods is I don't deny their existence, only their motives. It's a conversation, oddly enough, I had with my son a few days ago when he was actually asking me about them, and this came up because he's been reading through the manuscript. If something is truly immortal, how long before its very existence palls? What incredible sense of ennui must it suffer from? What is it going to do to keep its existence interesting? What can it do to give itself a diversion? And the answer is the ants below. I don't say they interfere, but they certainly give nudges. And it is, I'm not going to use the analogy of a chessboard and all the rest of that stuff, but we are nudged here and there in certain directions so they can experiment with us.
Right. Does that sound like maybe you're talking about demons there?
I don't actually believe in demons.
Right.
I believe there are darker spirits, darker elementals, but I can't say. I mean, a demon in the original Greek form only means spirits.
Yeah, I was going to point that out.
Demon
Actually, yeah.
is, how does something become demonized?
Yeah, that's it.
You can use Lilith, according to the Old Testament and the Judeo-Christian mythos. Lilith, first woman, not made from Adam's rib.
Yeah.
Won't obey, wants equality. Cast out. And then what happens next? We're talking about the original Mother Earth goddess, Gaia, Ishtar, Eostra, Easter, Ashtoreth, whatever. Isis. Demonized because it went from a matriarchal society religion to a patriarchal one. And that's basically it. You know, if a religion wants to pull you away from one thing, it demonizes what was there to take you away from it. You know, most of the old churches in England are built on the sites of old Celtic, if not Saxon, sites. You know, it's one of the things I mentioned, the Culver Towers, the old church there. That Saxon originally church at Norman, Saxon before, a Roman site before that, and then a Celtic site before that. Why do people choose a particular site to build on? It's not because of the view, especially with a religious site. There must be something there on the grounds that attracts them to it. But as each successive religion comes along, okay, we can use this place, people are used to coming to it, blah, blah, blah. Let's steal some of their rituals and traditions and transplant them onto our own and rename them and all the rest of it. But the bits they don't want, that are too controversial or they don't agree with, they demonise.
And including the word demon, they demonise.
Yeah. Well, even Lucifer, if you use that as a phrase, until the, say, 13th, 14th centuries, in art of the time, he was portrayed as a jailer. Not as a fallen angel. He was actually portrayed as a jailer, there to punish sinners. Not as the actual enemy.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's from the Book of Job, isn't it? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, no, it's the attitudes of the church at the time.
Oh, okay, right.
It was considered fine. This is Lucifer. He is there to punish sinners. He holds the keys to the prison known as hell. Bang. All of a sudden, attitudes change, mid-14th century onwards, where he then starts to become portrayed as, this is evil, this is not here to punish you, this is here to take you. You will suffer in hell because that's what God intends. But the devil, Satan in its original Arabic form, stranger or enemy. But the idea became, instead of this being is an angel or seraphim that works for God, all of a sudden, no, he's the enemy. I'm not a Luciferian or Satanist or whatever term you want to put on it. I have no interest in those things. People can follow who they like, how they like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think today there seems to be a divide on. I mean, a lot of religions will view anyone that pretty much do and have the mindset that you have. They'll regard that as satanic. And then there's obviously really satanic groups or people that it's kind of satanic is used as a kind of term to what they do, which is basically just working with negative energies, basically, and that is normally termed as Satanism. But yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of things. There's just so many words are used so loosely nowadays. It can be a bit difficult.
It's even saying that. I mean, the people who have contacted me in the last 3 years, the questions or responses of, although they've mostly been positive, I've had the accusations of heresy and all the rest of it. I've even had my first book described as being similar to Mein Kampf by a right-wing group that approached me at one time. And there I had to ask them, have you actually read it for real? Because I have Mein Kampf, and most of it means that you have to keep going backwards and forwards through the chapters to try and work out what it was actually saying. It's a very badly written book. I don't mind saying that. But I can't see any comparison between mine and that. But I've had people insisting it's all about the struggle, blah, 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 and it's so political. Well, there's no politics in it. I despise politicians. Burn them all.
Okay, well, David, have you got anything else you'd like to wrap that up with?
I mean, not really, but because Darren, we need back on the show at one point, particularly after his next book launch.
Yeah, I mean, when that book comes out, I think that'll be a good time to get you back on.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing I suppose that came to my mind as I was listening to that. You know, the way present paradigms, present theories in psychology manipulate the experiences of so-called schizophrenics is itself an academic disgrace. I was sort of sat here thinking of that. But on a lighter note, I mean, Darren, any websites or blogs you want to draw our attention to?
Well, I have my own blog spot, which is usually excerpts or videos that I've made containing bits of poetry. That's called keyofstorm.blogspot.com. I'm on Facebook under Darren Storer or Darren Storer Author. Anybody is welcome to contact me through any of those three anytime they want, or if they just type in the name of the book, you'll find the publisher's page. There's the reviews and so on there to let you know what other people think. But again, anybody wishes to speak, feel free. I'm there, I'll listen, and if they want to help, I can help them to whatever degree I can.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, well, thank you for coming on, Darren. It's been really good speaking to you.
It was a last-minute thing again, and Darren, as usual, stood up to the mark. You're a real trooper, Darren. Thanks a lot.
Not a problem. Anytime you need me, you know where I am.
Excellent. Thanks, and good luck with your new book as well.
Many thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Break a leg.
Well, David, what do you think of that one?
Well, isn't he an interesting guy? I mean, you know, I've had the privilege of knowing him for a very long time. There was always much more than met the eye in Darren's case. Look, I'm as interested as you are, Paul, in the psychic stuff, but, you know, my calling and my brief is to look at the literary side of these things. In Darren's case, it's the perfect crossover between those two worlds. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've always been fascinated by the subject, but I've always felt it's quite linked to art. You know, it's, when people write a song, they're communicating with something. You know, if you create something with your current mindset, then you're normally not creative. It normally comes from a subconscious mind, and I think as psychics, I think they they channel in that same place with art. So it's no surprise people like Darren write great books because linked to what they're doing psychically. Obviously, some people have it that little bit more aggressively than others, and I think obviously Darren is very, very psychic, and it will be, as we said earlier on the show, it would be great to go out in a little team and do a little investigation.
Get young Cano to see what we can do together.
Well, that brings us to our next guest is Brian Cano from Haunted Collector, the American TV show. We'll be able to actually pick his brains out and more about the technical side of it. Maybe he'll be able to let us know why my mouse stopped working in the middle of the show. But anyway.
Spooky.
Absolutely. Same as usual to our listeners. We really appreciate any help linking these shows to your Facebook pages, Google Plus, Twitter, and spread the word. We're a new show, and we need to let as many people know about it as possible. We've got more and more guests lining up now to come on. We're really excited about some of the people coming up. And we hope to just keep building on that. We're really passionate about this. We really want to make a go of it. And if you are enjoying what we're doing, please get behind us and link the show.
We've got the great, we've got the clever and the gay. Come and join us.
There you go. Well, I'm going to go off now and see if I can get my mouse working.
Luck to your mouse, and I am so jealous over that roast dinner, it's untrue.
Oh, well, there might even be some leftovers now for me, so
Okay.
Okay, chaps, until next time, see you soon.
Toodle pip.